Welcome to another podcast of Trophy Moments and a Few Firsts with Keith Baldwin. And my special guest today is Richard Green, which I'm truly honored to have him here. Richard is the board chair of Firstrust Bank here in Philadelphia and a partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. Congratulations on your recent success with the Eagles. And also congratulations on another recent honor, one of the most influential people in Philadelphia, as according to Philadelphia Magazine. So welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you, Keith. Pleasure to be here.
And I know that you're extremely busy. You're an extremely busy man. And it was very important for me to have you here because I wanted to, and I'll give you some context, our audience some context of why you're standing in front of me or with me and on my show today. I wanted to thank you. There's, I wrote a book, and that's what the firsts are about, Leap Year First. And you were instrumental, Firstrust Bank, in the first company owned by anybody in my family. You lent me the money 20 years ago to buy my company. I don't know if you know that or not, but Mike Dinda was my rep at that time, and Firstrust believed in me, and I thank you for that. And then fast forward to 2020, during a very difficult time, Firstrust, still my bank. And I think as a banker, it's amazing that you went above and beyond. First time in my life, my first on March 20th, was to lay off an employee. And I laid off all 50 of them at 2:30 in the afternoon. And I received a call less than an hour later from another one of your representatives, Beth, and offered me the opportunity to become a call center because one of your other customers, AnswerNet, had the opportunity and had the contract for the state of New York to become a call center and needed people to fill those seats. And Beth knew that I had 50 people to fill those seats and put me together. And 2 hours later, I ended up hiring my employees back. You helped me save their jobs. And we became a call center over that weekend and made calls for the next year until our business came back, the awards business. And then also, one last thing, and then we'll get to you. We didn't have our regular business. We were out of business. And we ended up doing some other business, PPE, and we became involved with supplying the state medical gloves for vaccines when that was needed. And it was very difficult to get a hold of. I was able to make the connections to bring those gloves in and supply the state. But in order to do that, I needed money. I needed a lot of money because I needed money for the deposits to bring in those containers of glove to supply the state. And you allowed me, Firstrust Bank, to sign a temporary line of credit to support those deposits to supply those gloves and made my company whole. So for that's why it was very important for me to have you on this show today. You may or may not know some of the details of that, but for the people out there, Firstrust is a third generation bank. Richard is third generation. And I know the history of the bank. It started in 1929 during another very difficult time in our history. During the Depression, your grandfather, started the bank in South Philadelphia, helping out people like you helped me during very difficult times. So thank you. So I know that's a long-winded introduction, and I appreciate you allowing me that, but welcome.
Well, thank you, Keith. So first, a few points. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to one of the great joys in my line of work is to be able to help people, and then occasionally they remember it. And
I remember, and I'll never forget.
I know that you do, and that makes it even more worthwhile. But I wanted to go back and start out. You talked about my grandfather. It was actually in 1934 that still in the Great Depression, but since this is a show about firsts, my grandfather was able to get the first Pennsylvania charter for a savings loan in coming out of the Great Depression. due to some of the New Deal legislation from Franklin Roosevelt. And he started what was then called First Federal in my great-grandmother's kitchen. And my dad was born in the apartment above. And the reason he started it was because in his neighborhood, one, that it was very difficult for some of first of all, about my grandfather, he was a Hungarian immigrant, came over at the turn of the century, and he did a lot of things to train himself, including learning how to speak English at the Free Library in Pennsylvania at night.
Can you imagine?
In Philadelphia. And then he took all kinds of other jobs. He sold real estate, he sold insurance, he sold shoes. He did a lot of things, but he enjoyed a good reputation in his neighborhood and the community. And there was not the commercial banks at the time would not lend, especially to the immigrant community. So people in his neighborhood asked him, they kept on saying, well, somebody should start a bank, somebody should do that. And my grandfather said, well, I decided I was going to be that somebody. And that's how he was able to go around door to door with my father in tow and convince his neighbors to put up, say, $5 of deposits, and he would match it. And that, he was able to cobble together $7,500 in deposits, no equity, deposits, so that he could get this charter. And because of the way he was regarded in his community, he was able to do that. $7,500 in those days was a lot of money.
Yes.
So that's how we got started on that premise of helping out people who the banks at the time were either unable or unwilling to serve.
So where did the name come from, Firstrust?
Well, that came, and I'll get there.
Okay.
In a minute. But we were a mutual savings and loan, and my dad came to work for my grandfather after he finished his undergraduate education and came back here and finished law school at night at Temple Law School. But when I was in graduate schools, I always had in mind that I wanted to buy First Federal at the time if we could. How
old were you?
I was 27 when I came out of schools.
Okay.
And this was right around the time that I in my early 30s. Basically, my dad and I came up with a way to buy the bank. But before that, here's the story. And I know you ask about kind of what are my trophy moments and what are my firsts.
Yes, that's one of my questions.
So
if this is your trophy moment?
So this is it. I'll tell you, it's a little extended, but so stay with me. But
I'm not going anywhere.
I'll tie it together. We had in mind that we'd like to find a way, instead of being a mutual, to actually buy the bank. It was very difficult to do, and I didn't know whether or not this was going to be my calling or not. But in the early 80s, the Eagles were, Leonard Toews owned the Eagles, mm-hmm. and it became obvious that Leonard would have to sell. I decided to put together a group of people to buy it. And if I had been successful, I would have had a small piece of the team and I would have run the team.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So I did. And in the process of that, I put together a group, and the way in which we were going to buy it was through what was then this new technology called a leveraged buyout. Well, I was unsuccessful in buying the team. Norman Braman outbid me by $5 million, which might as well have been $5 billion because I didn't have it. And but out of that, I learned about the technology of a leveraged buyout. In the year that followed that, my dad and I were able to figure out a way to essentially buy the bank, through using a leverage buyout. And the result of that was a complicated transaction that had not been done before and probably will not be done again. But we were successful at it. And as a result of that, we ended up owning the bank and repaying the debt. And now I own the bank free and clear. But through the process of owning the bank, then in 1994, when Jeffrey Lurie came to town and bought the Eagles, he wanted to have some limited partners who were local. And since people in town knew that I was interested, they approached me, and that's how I met Jeffrey Lurie. And as a result of that, I was then in a position to be able to make that investment and become his limited partner. So at the end of when the dust settled on this, I owned the bank, and I was able to be a part owner of the Eagles.
That's one hell of a trophy moment.
It's been an extraordinary run, and it's been 30 years now that I've enjoyed being partners with Jeffrey.
Well, we're recording this at the Pyramid Club, and you were telling me that you hadn't been back here in a while. And actually, who did you meet here?
Oh, yeah. Well, so just coincidentally, when you called me, I hadn't thought about it, but I guess it was 31 years ago. This is where I had my first dinner with Jeffrey.
And you were playing the Cardinals, and what was on the menu?
Oh, yeah. We were playing the Cardinals that weekend, and the good people at the Pyramid Club put together a menu which included roasted cardinal on the menu.
Did you order that?
Of course I did. Yes. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had roasted cardinal. How was it?
Well, it's always good to win. Yeah. It's always good to taste that. The taste of victory is good. Let's just say that.
So that's amazing trophy moment. That so much work goes into that, and probably a little bit of luck.
No question that it was luck and a lot of hard work.
Looking back,
yeah.
Do you shake your head and say, "How did I do that?" Or it was like, "I had this."
When you're young, I wasn't smart enough to realize that I couldn't do things, and so I acted like I could do anything. And this was one of those things that
you didn't know that you should have failed.
Yes, I didn't know, and
isn't that a gift?
It is, and
you had a goal, and
I absolutely had a goal.
Did you write it down? Like, I want to own the bank.
Well,
Just curious.
I write. I do live by 5-year plans, and while I did not write down that I wanted to own the bank, because actually my master's thesis at Wharton had been on converting banks from mutual to stock. And I had it in mind that if the opportunity arose and it was right to do that, I didn't really even dare to think that we might be able to do it and own it all entirely ourselves. But that came later. But what I did write down was that I wanted to own and manage a professional sports team. And it was 5 years, almost to the day, that since I had written that down on my 5-year plan, that I made the deal with
Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah.
So, wow. So the second part of this is, and I don't know if it's tied in, what's a first? You've done so many things in your life. What's something that you've always wanted to do that you haven't done yet that would be a first for you?
Well, I still harbor I have a hankering, I should say, to be able to actually manage a team. I think Howie Roseman does such a great job. I think he's the top GM in the business. I don't think that's probably in the cards. Not to mention the fact that I'm a little older than I was back when I had that. But I do think about that once in a while. Other than that, I'm at the stage of my life since I relinquished my CEO title and now own the bank and are the chairman, where I'm kind of playing with a few different things. One of the things that I'm most proud of that I'm doing that I think I can take to a different level is we started a foundation named in honor of my parents and my
the Green Family
Foundation. And it's
so tell us about that.
Sure, and I'm doing that with not only my children but also with my brothers and their families, and we're currently devoted to basically serving basic human needs.
When did you start that?
It was 2005 was when we were incorporated, but we really have begun the work in earnest when we funded it 3 years ago.
Okay.
So in these 3 years, we've been building out the mission of it and our values, and where we've landed on, at least for the foreseeable future, is dealing with basic human needs, focused on food insecurity, on anti-gun violence, and on climate change, because basically goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you remember your psychology 101.
I do remember, yep.
But when he did that, and so it doesn't matter, you want to self-actualize, but you can't self-actualize until you take care of basic human needs of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, education. And those are the things that we're devoted to. But in addition, when Maslow wrote his hierarchy of needs, there was an assumption that there was an abundance of free air and free water, and that has been called into question. So we are focused somewhat on climate change as well.
So give the audience an idea of how you're focusing it. Do you give grants? And what was the first grant you gave out, that the foundation give out?
Well, I don't think I can remember the first one we did, although we have done some.
So what's the one you're most proud of?
Well, there's I'm proud of a lot of them, but two that are of particular import here. One, Federation Housing, we support, and we named this as low income elderly housing in the Philadelphia area. And the first, we gave a significant grant and named the first house that we did after my grandfather, the Samuel A. Green house. And then in my mother's honor, we did another one called the Florence Green House. And we're coming up in the next year or so. We have funding lined up for one that will be immediately adjacent to the Flo Greenhouse, which we'll call the Daniel Greenhouse. So I have my parents together in this. So that one.
Where's that located?
It's up in Somerton. Yes, you know where Somerton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew where it was. I just wanted my audience to know where it's located.
Yes. Yes.
So who are you serving there? Who walks in the door of that facility?
Well, they're lined up to walk in. The naturally aging population.
Unfortunately.
But there are a lot of elderly and lower income residents of Philadelphia who are looking for a safe, clean place that they can live with dignity.
Have some of them been on the streets? Are they coming off the streets? Or are they coming out of other situations?
I think there probably are some on the streets, but most are coming out of housing that they just can't afford to maintain, or situations where they're burdens to their family, and it's a way for them to do that. And the programs provide access to food and shopping and medical care and activities, and it's really a wonderful place to be, to live your life with in safety and dignity.
Yeah. 2020 made me appreciate that more than ever. One of my first was sleeping on the streets. I was on 6th Street between Race and Calla Hill, December 5th, and it was cold. And I was there on the side of a hill in a sleeping bag. I don't know how they do it. I wanted to understand what it felt like to lose everything. I mean, we take it for granted. The house we live in, the food that we get, to your point, just the bare minimum. And some people aren't that fortunate to have that. So that you're able to serve that community is just very commendable. And I'm sure your grandfather would be extremely proud, and your father would be proud, and your mother would be proud. One question, when you were telling that story about buying the bank, was your grandfather, what did he have to say about that? Was he?
Oh, he wasn't. No
he
longer,
passed away?
He passed, yes.
Okay. How long after that?
Well, he passed away, I guess, in 1979. So this was.
So who owned the bank at that point?
Well, a mutual savings loan, like a mutual insurance company, is technically owned by the depositors,
right, or
the policyholders, but as a practical matter, it's really not owned by anybody. It's a kind of a legal fiction that they do, that the depositors own the bank, but they have no risk. Their deposits are insured, and they get their rate of return whether the bank succeeds or not. So it's not like a normal shareholder arrangement. It's a legal fiction that was invented to create this thing. So in the process, we basically have to convert, had to offer shares to our depositors, but we basically said, well, if you don't want to buy it, then we'll buy it. And that's how we did it. Yeah. Was there anybody else at the time that you looked at and said, I'm learning from them, and you use those, or did you just kind of figure this out on your own? I would say that, parts of it I learned from different people. One, the technique to finance it was through the leverage buyout that I learned through my first unsuccessful bid for the team.
There's a lesson there. So you failed.
Yes.
Were you disappointed?
I was very disappointed, but
you didn't let it stop you.
Well, most entrepreneurs that I know have failed at one time or another, and you learn. Like any adversity in life, it's not whether you face it; it's how you react to it. And so for me, I said, well, okay, I've learned a lot of valuable things. Tuck it away. And the benefits, I always tell my children, the benefits of a good liberal arts education is that if you do it right, you can see patterns. You can see patterns out of things that are disconnected, and learn from all experiences.
So you said you'd get to, how did Firstrust get named?
Oh, so in the process, when we were converting, we had to go. We were a First Federal Savings Loan, so we were
first
federal.
In the name.
So we had first in the name, which we always believe in. I never aspire to be anything less than first, and that was in the name.
I didn't steal that when I wrote the book.
That's okay. That's okay. And we didn't steal it either. But we're not the first people to think about first. But we had that. But we had to change. We had to get federal out of the name because we became state, and then we weren't a savings loan anymore. So we had to come up with a new name for that. So we hired some fancy Madison
firm.
Avenue people to come tell us what we already knew, and they helped us realize that, one, first is powerful, and second, our origins are rooted in trust, and so when it was kind of a first ballot Hall of Fame decision. When the name was put up there, it was.
You knew immediately?
We knew that this was for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going forward, so you're chairman now. You gave up CEO. What's in the future for Firstrust? Is there a fourth generation?
Yes. I have a son who has just finished.
I've met him. He's what a great kid.
Well, thank you. So he's learning. He had worked for us a couple of years, and then had worked during the time he was at Wharton to get his MBA. He's now back working with us and learning the bank, and also helping us in where his primary attention is right now is kind of on our corporate venture side, looking at the intersection of finance and technology, because that's pretty much where the business is headed. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know whether he wants the job that I had or
Did
not.
you ask him?
So, well,
I don't know. We don't have to get there.
Let me say we're in discussions, but I want him. He has to know what the job is.
Yeah.
And like I feel with all my children, you not only have to be interested but capable.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to find out. So I'm happy. In the meantime, Tim Abel, who we've worked together for 20 years,
the best.
And Tim Abel is a incredibly well respected banker, and he's I always say about Tim he's a great banker and an even better man.
Yes,
and
I would agree with that.
And for me to give up my CEO title for my family business,
was that hard?
Very difficult for me, but I felt like it was important for me to see whether or not, whether I could tolerate anyone else running my business besides me, and also, but the primary thing was really to give me time to focus on what I think the next generation of great leaders will be. And Tim's done a great job, and so far he's really been in the job.
Do you miss it? Do you miss the day-to-day, being having your hands on it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I am, as the people at Firstrust will tell you, I am not disconnected from what happens there. But
you know what I mean.
But I would tell you, the way I counsel our clients, we finance a lot of family businesses, small businesses, privately owned businesses, professionals, real estate professionals, entrepreneurs. And when they do what they do well, they usually come up with a situation where either they're transferring the business to their children, or they're selling. And when I counsel them, I say two things. One, before you do this, make sure you have in mind that you're not leaving something, you're going to something else.
That is so important to know.
Yes.
I know a number of people that have sold their business. It was their identity. It was their life. They didn't have something to go to. They didn't have a reason to get up in the morning, and they're depressed.
Yeah. So it's very important that you have that. Yeah. And the second thing is, first, do nothing for 6 months. And
Did you do that?
I
can't see you doing nothing for 6 months. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't say I did.
So
nothing.
Your version of nothing.
I did. Yes, I did less. And then in March, of course, it was effective. The beginning of this year in January, and then in March, Silicon Valley Bank happened, and all of a sudden I was back at work, working hand in hand with Tim to make sure that we were fine, which we are, I'm happy to say. But it got me back. So I basically said, all right, my new 6 months starts from July 1. And as a result, So I would say,
Have you been traveling or?
well, I travel, and of course, it's once it's football season.
You're
I'm
immersed.
I'm immersed in that, and with the foundation work that we're doing, and I have other interests. I built up over the years. I have a real estate company, and we own mostly multifamily units across the country. So I have lots of things. Besides trying to be a mentor of some kind to my 3 children, I have things that occupy my time. But is it hard? It's
Because that's your identity.
Well,
right? That's who you are.
Well, I like to think that I'm more than that.
I understand that.
But I understand the issue. You devote your life to building something.
Yes.
And it's hard to disassociate from it. And I never want to disassociate from it. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's in good hands. I want to have a role in bringing on and cultivating the next generation of great leaders at Firstrust. And I want to be able to do other things. And to see whether or not, it's going to be a 4th generation business or it won't, or it may be some combination.
Yeah. So I think we're near the end of our time. And so is there anything else you want to tell my audience before we end it about upcoming firsts that you may be thinking about, other than managing a team, that you haven't done?
Well, I would say, for me, there's some travel that I haven't done in my life. Yeah.
So what's the one place that you haven't been that you want to get to?
I don't know that I have one place.
No?
Really.
Top 3.
There's certain, I haven't traveled in the Far East or Asia, and I would like to do that.
So you haven't been to China?
I haven't been to China. I haven't been to Japan.
I've heard so many good things about Japan. I haven't been there. It's on my list.
Yeah.
I've been through China for purchasing purposes, Hong Kong, and then inside.
I haven't had the chance, even though in college I spent a lot of time studying China and Japan. But
China has changed.
Yeah.
I've been there over a number of years, and it's changed. Hong Kong has changed.
Yeah, well, that I've heard.
Yeah, I'm sure you're well aware of that.
I am. So, but that's. I mean, it's something that I want to do. I don't feel.
You're not burning.
I don't feel like it's a burning issue. Although I would say that in my life, the benefits of travel have been. There are a lot more benefits to travel than just the travel. And so I encourage it, but most of my
culture
travel,
and meeting people and just learning.
Yes. Well, it's that. I should say that one of the other things that I do, I have interests in now 3 hotels in Turks and Caicos, and Turks and Caicos became a place that I found basically around 30 years ago, and I love it. I spend as much time there as I can, and as is my want, I can't just go and be there. I somehow had to be involved in some development or some business there as well. So I've watched Turks and Caicos kind of grow and prosper over these last years, which brings me joy. So, in a sense, that's my main international travel.
Well, on those happy thoughts, we're going to end it, and I want to thank you again for gracing us and me with your presence, and thank you very much.
Well, Keith, first of all, you're one of a kind, and it's a pleasure to know you, and I'm constantly impressed with the way your life keeps evolving. So keep up the good work too.
Thank you, Richard. Take care.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.